This week on Theatre Talk.
People say, when did you first want to be an actor? When I starred as Prince Sparkle Eyes of the Fairies Forest and was a tormenting director.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
Choose that business. Saving money and good management will succeed in any business.
Yes, saving money. But where can a woman get the money to save in any other business?
From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
When Mrs. Warren's Profession opened in New York in 1905, they arrested the producer and all the actors. But now it is back.
Yes, and there are going to be no arrests here because these are really terrific performances in this fine revival of the great Shaw play. It's at the Roundabout, and it stars the brilliant, brilliant Cherry Jones, who won a Tony Award for Doubt, and that was the last time you were on Theatre Talk.
It was indeed.
You were defending, what was her name?
Sister Aloysius.
Sister Aloysius. Welcome to Theatre Talk, Cherry.
Not so much defending her as representing her.
It's representing her very well, too. And Cherry is supported in this production by one of my favorite actors, one of New York's favorite actors, Edward Hibbert, who, this is your second or third appearance on Theatre Talk, I think.
I think it is.
Didn't you on Curtains, when you were in leather, you came on quite a bit.
I didn't come here in leather, but I wore leather in the show.
That's right.
And it's this
Next time I'll wear leather
first
for
appearance.
you. But the Curtains with Karen Ziemba,
Yes,
I
and
think.
David Hyde Pierce.
And then before that with Richard Easton when we did Noises Off.
That's right. Well, welcome back.
So the hat trick.
And now, I was just looking at Ben Brantley's review for this production, and he calls you, Cherry, glittering, and you, Edward, reliable.
I know. Good old reliable Hibbert.
I was just, what is it like when you read glittering, glittering, and reliable?
Listen, there are words I might have preferred to read, but I'll take reliable over a lot of other ones.
Have you, I went back and looked at the reviews you've had over the years, Cherry. Have you ever had a bad review? It seems to me you have always gotten over-the-top rave reviews from everybody.
I've heard from loved ones. I get slaughtered in this one, too. I mean, you get bad reviews as well as good reviews. You can, I remember someone telling me that Stella Adler stopped acting because she couldn't take the reviews. And I thought, wow, well, there seems to be an easy solution to that one. Just don't read them. So I really try not to read them anymore.
I don't think they're helpful, but I'm going to be honest and say I admire and respect my colleagues who don't read them. I do, and voraciously. And I'll tell you why, because, I mean, it's a business, actually. Yeah. It's art, but it's also a business, and I like to know what's being said about the plays I'm in.
They say, though, even with a good review, sometimes if a critic can isolate a moment in a performance, it makes you self-conscious of what you're doing, and you might not be able to do it again. Is that a pitfall?
And you know what, basically, when they're good, they're never good enough, and when they're bad, they're unreadable. And as long as we all know that, we can get on with it.
Good old reliable Edward.
That's it. Reliable Edward speaks.
All right, this is Shaw play is one of my favorites, and after all these years, it still seems to have the power really to shock an audience. Cherry, if you could just tell us the character you're playing and why you were interested in tackling this role this particular time.
Mrs. Warren is a woman who came from a horribly impoverished, deprived childhood, had an older, wiser sister who went into prostitution very early on, made a ton of money, and then got her little sister into the business. Her other two sisters, who were the respectable ones, died from lead poisoning in a white lead factory, and the other one was probably beaten to death by her drunken husband. So this young woman knew at an early age there had to be another option. She could make money, save money, and grow as a wily prostitute. And she and her sister eventually opened houses on the continent, brothels on the continent. She got wealthy English investors, and now she's filthy rich and owns brothels in Budapest, Vienna, Brussels, Ostend. And she had a child at a young age, and wanted this child to be respectable and have the childhood she didn't have. So she's boarded out this child and made sure she's had everything she's ever needed. She's boarded her with wonderful people. She's had the best schools England could offer. And now this young woman has come of age, and now it's time
For mother and daughter to meet.
for mother and daughter to really meet as adults. And she's still not ready for the daughter to know the truth, but the daughter, of course, is now gleaning the truth. And that's where the play begins.
One of the things I'm always fascinated about the Shaw characters is that he gives Vivi, your daughter, sort of the proper way of seeing the world. Prostitution is bad, it's exploiting the girls. But then he gives the speeches to Mrs. Warren and to her investor capitalist. And even though he wants you people to be kind of represent the evil capitalist, he gives you such great speeches.
Yeah.
And you find yourself saying, well, actually, she has a point about being a prostitute.
A friend of mine in my dressing room the other night said Shaw is a torturer. Because he really does make you sit and listen to all different sides of the argument.
And you take
presents-
everybody's sides. There is no black
There's
or
no-
white in this play, which
Yeah.
is why it's so fascinating to play.
He says in the introduction that the alternative in this play is not between morality and immorality,
Right.
but two sorts of immorality.
It's funny. I mean, it's again like doubt. People come down one way or the other
Right,
on this
right.
play, and the end of the play.
It's a wonderful journey of a play. It leads you to believe, as it begins, a pastoral English garden, this fascinating, independent young girl.
You come in-
the artist friend, the best friend of Kitty Warren. So once, we're into that lovely world of epigrams and manners. And then, slowly, we get into a world of capitalism, secrets, lies, chock-a-block with great lines. I mean, I can't believe this man was, I think, 37, and he gives Kitty Warren, a line right at the end of the play, "Lord help the world if everyone took to doing the right thing." I think that's a genius line.
Yeah.
No, well, that's Shaw. You know, there was the famous Max Beerbohm character of him standing on his head because he flips everything on its head.
Yeah.
The whole view of morality,
Yeah.
Oh,
of
yeah.
capitalism, twists again and again. It's fascinating. You know a little about the history of the play. Why were the actors arrested? Do we know?
I
that?
think because if you think about what this play embraces,
Prostitution.
never mind prostitution, the suggestion of incestuous romance between two characters, I think it was wildly ahead of its time.
Yeah. And a prostitute who, doesn't die of consumption, not only doesn't die of consumption,
rich.
is proud of her,
What is that great line you have? Do you know how
rich I am.
Yeah.
He was criticized. He was criticized for not making her villainous enough.
Right.
And he said, if I'd made it Mr. Warren's profession and Mr. Warren were a bookmaker, no one would object
No.
to gambling being evil. But it's
Ooh,
the
you
part
read that
yeah,
forward
I did.
very
I
carefully.
did.
Yeah, but she's not villainous on one level. I don't regard Kitty as a
No,
villain
I don't think
at
he
all.
did either.
I think
Yeah.
she speaks very eloquently through Shaw about why she did what she did, which is again why I think you don't go and say, well, that's the good angel of the play and that's the bad demon. I don't think it's
But it
that.
is interesting. She does. Vivi has that wonderful line near the end of the fourth act when she says, "Mother, I'm probably the only young woman you've ever done good to. Don't spoil it now." And Mrs. Warren says, "Yes, heaven forgive me. It's true."
Yeah.
So it's just heaven to get to. Because there's no black and white; it's all gray.
No.
And
with
it
Shaw.
also,
And
it also shows you, as you were saying, when Shaw says wildly and you pump up the fireworks there, there is, I think, sometimes an unfair rep that Shaw gets that the plays are too heady, intellectual. I remember one critic saying, the problem with Shaw is that he's only alive from the neck up. But you see how
I don't
visceral
think
this...
this is true of this play at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is so modern. I mean, I listen to it quite a lot. Normally, after you get into a run, you turn that speaker down and put your iPod in. But I listen to this resolutely.
yeah, every night.
One
I
of the
never
great
miss a
lines,
word.
I want this to be tattooed on me somewhere. I must have work and excitement or I shall go melancholy mad. I mean, how modern stuff is this? And the play ends, talk about modernity. She says, "That's why I have to get rid of you." I mean, this is like the stuff of a contemporary play.
Yeah.
The fact it's set in an Edwardian period with different values. I think a lot of the politics and the hypocrisy in this play are, God knows, resonant today.
Well, Shaw had a very complex relationship with his mother, right? Didn't she
Oh,
sort of?
yes.
Yeah, she
have
left
a-
him, yeah.
Well,
left
remember
the-
there was a menage a trois going on in the
Right,
house.
that's right.
Because there was Shaw's father, but Shaw's mother was in love with Shaw's music teacher.
Right.
That's
And the
right.
music teacher moved into the house.
Is that in the Holroyd book? Did you read that?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
We're talking about the Michael Holroyd book, which is a 3-volume, brilliant assessment of Shaw's life. And if you look at a lot of Shaw's plays, there is often menage a trois, triangles. So in this play, you have Vivi and the boy she likes, and then into it comes your business partner who wants Vivi. And
Right.
you have this
Yeah.
Yeah.
triangle. That it becomes a
Yeah.
pattern in a lot of Shaw's plays.
Yeah.
Interesting. While I have you two great actors here, I just want to get a sense of how you began, what got you started, why you wanted to be an actor. I mean, you grew up in
Paris, Tennessee.
Paris, Tennessee, and what was going on in little Cherry Jones's life in Paris, Tennessee, where she says, "I want to be Mrs. Warren someday."
Well, I just always loved doing, probably just always was one of those little kids who was always putting something on and performing, and I had a whole gang. We lived in the woods, and we would, create all sorts of dire situations, and we'd have swords, and we just played full out fantasy all the time. And I just always wanted, to keep it up and never really have to grow up. And so I saw this woman when I was 8 years old at the Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia. They were doing The Country Girl, and my parents, we were passing through, and my parents didn't have a babysitter, so they brought 8-year-old me, and the lights went, and this woman came down to the lip of the stage, and the lights went out on her, and it was the old lights that used to ghost. You remember you'd have to count to 3 before you could move, because it would go to black, and then it would ghost on you, and then it would go to a full blackout. Well, the woman said her last lines, the lights went to black, and then they did that ghosting, and I thought it was her soul. Like I thought it was this last burst of this beautiful woman who'd been, and we were on the front row, and I just thought, ooh, yeah, that's what I want to do.
For the rest
I want to, yeah.
It's interesting you say about the playing, because we had Chris Walken on last year when he was in a Behanding in Spokane. He said, well, I'd go out and my friends and I would go to movies and we'd reenact the movies in the parking lot. And he said, and after all these years and all these acting lessons and all this stuff, it's still basically going out in the parking lot and playing around and pretending.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Better though, you came from a theatrical family.
I came
so
from a
you grew
theatre
up in the
family, and I
business.
think, to make a long story short, if you grow up in the home of working actors, you get a very, very eyes wide open look at what the business is like, which I was glad for. They never pushed me, but it became palpably clear when at the age of 11, I wrote, starred, and directed in my own production of The Fairy Forest in my parents' 2-tiered garden in Epsom, Surrey.
Somehow I feel your upbringings were slightly different. The forest
Yes,
you're
but it
talking
all
about.
comes out in the wash. You know?
Sorry, go on.
So people say, when did you first want to be an actor? When I starred as Prince Sparkle Eyes of the Fairies Forest and was a tormenting director. I'm writing a one-man show and I say I was the Eric von Stroheim of Windmill End, Epsom, Surrey. The children were maimed with gardening tools if they showed up 1 minute late for rehearsal. And then we fast forward, and I went to RADA, which I still say, and I am a great believer in that particular institution, is the best training an actor can have. Sally was at RADA too.
Yeah.
I loved it there. It was a short course because guess what, folks? You don't learn how to do it.
Yeah.
They give you the tools, the craft. I was glad of it. I enjoyed it. But then when you are blessed to get the keys of the kingdom, and in your early years as an actor, go to work at, as mentioned earlier, I think, Chichester Festival Theatre, in the company of Alec Guinness, Joan Plowright, and Maggie Smith. Well, that is worth the training. So I was able to observe and watch 3 master craftsmen at work.
Can I ask you, what did you learn from each of the 3 people? Can you just give us a sense
Different
of
things. Guinness's extraordinary economy. I mean, he played Shylock, and it was absolutely brilliant.
economy of gesture?
Of choice, of gesture, he can mine a word by doing so little. Joan's extraordinary eccentricity as an actress, and Maggie's breathtaking command of language. I mean, what she can do with a word is worth 3 years at RADA, I would say.
Did you have an experience like that, Sherry? Were you ever in a production where you were with some well-known actors that you were watching or learning from?
Well, I was lucky. I got to go to the American Repertory Theater in about 1980 as a member of the company. And it was a true rep. We were performing at night, rehearsing another play by day. And all of those, I was the youngest member of the company, and Brustein had just moved from Yale to Harvard.
Bob Brustein.
And brought with him people like Tony Shalhoub.
Oh, yeah.
And my friends Tommy Dara and Karen MacDonald, who was a Boston actress who came into the company. And they were all like my older brothers and sisters, and they were so accomplished. And I'd had this wonderful Yale graduate school. I played Rosalind that first season, and I remember just taking my Shakespeare to each of them and saying, "Now, what does this mean? And how do you beat out?" And they took me under their wing, and we had such amazing directors up there too. I worked with Sorbonne 5 times at a particularly fertile time in his career, so I really got to learn from these. And just being in a company that's that tight. We took a 3-month tour of Europe, playing all of the festivals. And when we came back, we were so tight, you could have thrown any play at us.
And you would have
and
just...
we could have just done it. You know,
It's the
'cause
joy of repertory, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we
It
just...
Doesn't happen anymore. You
No,
see,
well,
I mean,
you were in rep in England,
yes,
weren't you?
that's what you do in England. What you're talking about is what I cut my teeth on. But I wish, it's been said many times, but one does go to a national theatre, and sometimes one doesn't have a good time when one sees what one sees. But it still is a place where there is you're moving from watching a Harold Pinter play to a new David Hare play to a revival of a 17th century comedy. This is amazing, and we don't have it, and it's a great shame.
It's interesting what you say. I was talking to Brian Dennehy the other day, a wonderful actor, and Brian was saying, we have these big movie stars that come to Broadway, and they're doing 12 weeks and 14 weeks, and he said, I don't get the play until 6 months into the run.
It's the
is
truth.
that
I love
true?
a long run.
I still wish we could give I wish people who come during previews, they could buy a preview ticket, and for $10
come back
more, they
again.
could come back the last week of the run, because it would be a completely different experience. I mean,
Especially with a play like this.
yeah, I mean, this play just has to marinate and marinate, and I think we all are feeling that we're just now getting to a place that we can really grow from, to the rest of the run. I mean, it's a completely different experience than it was those first couple of weeks. And so I'm not going to say I'm going to subsidize those tickets, but I'll meet you afterwards if you come again.
Come back to see. It's interesting, though. Do you also feel that you really only start getting into the performance after?
Well, it's interesting because I was blessed to be introduced to this play. Well, I've seen it several times, but I was introduced to it because Emily Mann did a production at the MacArthur Theatre in Princeton, which I was in playing Mr. Praed, the part I'm playing now. But I realized the run at Princeton, like any regional theatre, we had a run which was not quite as long as the preview period we had. So there was a lot of investigation left, and I'm so glad to be back.
He did it with the brilliant Suzanne Bertish. So the first couple of weeks rehearsal, I just had to get over the fact that he'd just come away from playing.
Not just, darling. We get a bit of breathing time between it. But people may think I'm eccentric and mad. I'm sure they do. But I love a long run. I seem to have done an awful lot of them. But I mean, I like.
I do too.
I like the whole ritual of it. I like those ebbs and flows.
The steady paycheck.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. I like venting my... Cherry knows about this. I mean, I have this thing. If I don't like an audience, I vent after the
Where
show.
do you vent?
Well,
got
it's
the
the
name
degree
Mr.
of a smile
Mr.
I'll do
Creepy
at the curtain
Pants.
call. I'm not kidding you. It may sound childish. If they are a tiresome, bronco, irritating... And the cell phones, they are dead people. I say 1 ring, unfortunate. 2... be really afraid. 3, come see me after the show. I'm not for a drink.
What did you say, Mr. Creepy Pants?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What do you mean, Mr. Creepy Pants? Because I do this sometimes?
No, he would early on in previews, if the audience was not suiting Mr. Hibbert, he would make it well known to every cast member, every crew member, and Doug would come back and say, "Don't let Mr. Creepy Pants infect you."
No, I have no time for it. But I'm saying that back to a long run, then you get the wonderful. You get we've had it. A matinee audience you want to take home your lovers so much, and then a Wednesday night from absolute hell.
I just wanted to say that when we did Doubt, now
Did you give Donald Muller wine to drink?
We did 708 performances, including the tour.
That's right. Yeah.
And it wasn't until late in the tour in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when I felt like I'd finally gotten it. And that's
But
the
that's
honest
beautiful,
to gosh
isn't
truth.
it? I mean,
Yeah.
This is after the Tony Award, all of the accolades, everything.
Minneapolis is the place I go, yes.
Is
that
there a
was-
moment in a performance where you realize that one particular performance, one particular line, one scene where you suddenly go, I've got it now?
Well, I think like for me, it's like once every 6 weeks or something, you go, ooh, that each scene sort of landed right where one hoped it would. It's still not where you ever want it to be. It's the famous Martha Graham letter to Agnes de Mille where she says, there is no... Do you all not know
I
that
don't know.
letter?
No.
I've got it in the frame.
Everybody go Google Martha Graham's letter to Agnes de
Agnes de
Mille. It's the
Mille's
most
genius.
brilliant thing.
What does she say?
But at one
What is-
point she says in it, there is no satisfaction whatsoever at any time, only a queer, divine dissatisfaction.
That's
And that's the life of the artist.
And you're
'cause
always furrowing around with a text. I mean, I suppose there's a shelf life. I mean, a Shaw play, that's always going to be worth investigating it further. Noises Off is like good Chinese food. It's like a wonder. It is a joy. We did that play at a time when America was devastated. We opened a month after 9/11.
That's right.
And it was really quite moving to hear these people returning to the theatre. And these howls of laughter of what is probably the greatest farce ever written.
Yeah.
But you can't be minding a subtext in the farce.
I saw you the night you dropped the bottle.
You go on about that for one night.
I swear to you, I went to see there's a scene where they're throwing bottles all
And
over
I
the
said,
farce.
don't you do that. I don't like props. Don't let me have to do that.
And
But
he dropped the bottle and it bounced because it was rubber.
I think actually what happened was it bounced and I picked it up again and got around. So let's get over that right now.
rebound.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. I thought, Edward, drop the
But
bottle.
that's my point, though. I mean, there are language plays with character-driven narrative. You sink your teeth into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Others, not so much.
Yeah, well, your first one on Broadway, your debut with Lillian Gish.
No.
No, sorry.
Lillian Gish.
Evil
Evil Gallion, I'm sorry.
The great Evil Gallion.
Yes,
I
yes,
was
yes.
just new in New York and I got asked to go and meet her, and I'll never forget her, this extraordinary woman with the manners that belie a long life in the theatre. I mean, you haven't been in to meet people and you can't even believe the lack of charm. But she got up from her seat, she came forward, she engaged. We were asked to choose a little bit of one of the Alice's characters, and we read, and she was absolutely extraordinary, and the dignity, the nobility of her, both as a director, and sadly it was very short-lived.
It was her adaptation of Alice in
Yes,
Wonderland.
which she'd
that she
done
directed.
before
Yeah.
in New York, back when she had her theatre company.
The Civic Rep.
Exactly.
Was it any good?
Was the production good? It was absolutely breathtaking to look at, but the problem was, it was like being in Madame Tussauds. We were also incarcerated in the costumes of all these characters. I think Lewis Carroll's words were sort of like a scrim between us and them. It was breathtaking to look at. I think it was John Lee Beatty who did the sets.
Yeah, yeah.
And we opened at Christmas, and I'm afraid we were the biggest turkey in Christmas that season.
That happens. When you say encased in these things, you have these fantastic Kathy Zuber, I think,
Kathy Zuber.
costumes that you wear. These big bustles and these
I
massive
look like a
hats.
cruise liner. And in the final scene of Battleship.
You do. You have this big, gigantic pirate hat on.
Yeah.
Was it you who once told me that you found, when you were working on Sister Aloysius, you got the glasses? The glasses were the key to the character. Is it the hats here?
You know
or-
what? From the first day I saw those costume sketches, and from the first day I was wearing this big old dilapidated straw hat because I knew that was going to be such a huge part of the character, and the fan, which I threw away in a preview, and the parasols, and I got all the accoutrement because I knew it was going to.
So that's how you work. You like the
I don't
props
necessarily
that-
like those props, but I knew I was going to have to deal with them, so I just got used to them early on.
And you have that fabulous tarty wig.
Oh, that wig! I know the wig was very
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
Yes, it's a bit Mrs. Lovett.
It's sort of Mrs. Lovett meets Colette.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's good.
That's right. And your hair isn't so bad either, Edward. It's fuller than I remember it being.
It might be, yes.
And a different color. All right, they're as much fun on stage as they are off stage. Cherry Jones and Edward Hibbert in Mrs. Warren's Profession at the Roundabout Theater till
November 28th.
November 28th. And see the last performance, because then you'll really be cooking.
That's right. We
You don't get
promise.
you don't get your $10 from Cherry to come back.
And no cell phones or Mr. Creepy Pants. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't you be led astray by people who don't know the world, my girl.
The only way for a woman to provide for herself decently is for her to be good to some man that can afford to be good to her. If she's in his own station of life, let her make him marry her. But if she's far beneath him, she can't expect it. Why should she? Ask any lady in London society that has daughters, and she'll tell you the same, except that I tell you straight and she'll tell you crooked. That's all the difference.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.